You are listening to Christians in Corporate, the podcast that inspires corporate Christians to bring their full selves to work by shining a light on successful corporate executives and leaders across the globe. I'm your host, Paige Rakintarin. Let's get into it. This is the story of JB Ryan. JB currently leads the Molson Coors billion-dollar retail sales business in the Western US. She's a wife, she's a mom, and has over 20 years of international marketing and sales experience. Throughout her career, not only has she helped turn around well-known brands such as Lite in the US, she's also trained over 1,000 corporate executives to become more confident and impactful presenters as the CEO of UIGNITED. UIGNITED is a training and development company, and its mission is to ignite lives and careers through presentation, leadership, life, and confidence coaching. Now, JB is also the founder and executive sponsor of Molson Coors Christian Employee Circle, where she gathers professionals of faith within her workplace to pray, encourage, and inspire one another. In this episode, JB shares her personal and professional story and shares how God has been her anchor and has always ordered her steps, even through the difficult times. It was such a great conversation. I pray this episode blesses you. JB, thank you so much for joining today's podcast. How are you doing?
Paige, it's my absolute pleasure to be here, saying hi from a cool and rainy Southern California today, but I'm doing fantastic. It's Monday. Can't wait to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this conversation. I know we've spoken a couple of times before today, but I've been really looking forward to this conversation. But before we get started, I do have a couple of quick fire round questions I wanted to ask you. I always think that this is a great way and a fast way for people to know you a little bit more. So the questions I have are quick fire questions, right? So
bring it on.
You just bring it on. So it basically is this or that, meaning you just give me one answer that suits you well. Don't need to think too deep about it. It isn't deep, not that serious. Very straightforward questions. Are you ready?
Go for it.
All right, let's go. Okay. Would you rather work from home or work from the office?
Work from home. As long as I can get out as well.
Yeah, true. Video call or phone call?
Video call, absolutely.
Yeah. Email or live conversation?
Oh, live conversation. I don't like
you seem like someone that's like live conversation. You're like, I'm not typing an email. Early bird or night owl?
Definitely early bird.
Yeah. Predictability or excitement?
Oh, excitement, dude.
Fruits or veggies?
Man, I'm getting older, so I'll have to say veggies.
Yeah, right? I know. I wanted it to be fruits for me too, but I'm like, it has to be veggies. Tidy desk or messy desk?
Oh, tidy. I tend to run messy, so I work very hard at keeping everything tidy.
Yeah, I think a tidy desk definitely helps our minds too, right? I feel like anytime my desk is messy, then I'm like, wait, what am I doing? So I think we're aligned there. After work drinks or movie at home?
Interesting. It depends. I love being out and about, but now I have a family, so I prioritize time with them when I have a chance. Yeah. But I do get cabin fever pretty quick. So yeah. I know I'm not giving you quick answers as long answers. But there we go.
It's all right. Two more. Road trip or plane trip?
I am on 100 flights a year, so I want to say road trip because I don't do enough of them.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay, and then the last one. Leggings or jeans?
Oh, jeans.
Jeans? Really? Oh my goodness.
You mean like leggings I can walk around in?
Yeah, I guess like
leggings.
just.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking. I'm just thinking.
After COVID, it's all about comfort.
Yeah.
Comfortable.
Yeah.
No wires and buttons.
Exactly. I'm just like jeans are a no, leggings are a yes. Like everything I wear when I work from home, it's my standard is start with leggings and then we'll do the top and make it look cute.
I'm actually wearing jeans for you today.
Oh, you are? I'm wearing leggings. All right, JB, let's start from the beginning. I'm so excited to share with the listeners your story. It's so rich. It's so great. I think many people know you as an international marketing and sales guru, right? You've worked with some of the largest multinationals in the world. You are a wife. You are a mother. You're also a presentation and career coach. But if I was to ask you, who is JB? What would you say?
It's very easy for me to answer that question. First of all, I'm a child of God. That is the way I identify primarily.
Yeah.
And, to me, that's a citizen of heaven, not because I'm great, but because God is great. So that's number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, as you said, it's mom, wife. So blessed to be a mom and a wife. I was single for 13 years, so I do appreciate that every day. Sister, daughter, aunt, and friend. That's definitely secondly what I identify as. And then thirdly, I see myself as an igniter. That's a very important word to me.
Mm-hmm.
I ignite brands. I've worked on two very big brand turnarounds, the one I led, and I totally see myself as having the ability to ignite businesses, events, like people would try and put an event together, not getting much done. I'll come and blow some life into it. And then most importantly, people. I believe my calling is helping people believe in themselves, and you spoke about the presentation and confidence coaching. Obviously do a lot of that in my day-to-day, my corporate job as well, but helping people to be ignited. I just remember those years when my life was pretty dull and a couple of things happened and my life took off. And that is what I ultimately try and do, whether it's in work or in my personal life.
Yeah, I love that. Bringing light into people's lives to ignite them, restart them, or reignite the fire, right? Because that's beautiful, because I feel like everyone has a light within them, right? And they just need someone or something to reignite the light. So I'm glad that God called you to reignite that fire. Because when I first met you, I'm like, I like your vibe. Like, you're just very like fun. And so I'm so excited about that. Okay, so I was actually going to say you're in sunny California, but you're not. It's raining there.
Today, people, especially at my company, they always roll their eyes when I complain about the weather, because I don't really have anything to complain about. I'm looking out the window when it's rainy and the wind's blowing, but I'll take it. I'll take it because it's never really cold.
Yeah, because I'm in Chicago and it is cold. Although it's sunny today, it is cold. So
I lived in Chicago for 2.5 years and I loved it. Big walled city, snowy, romantic in the winter, but it's pretty brutal. It's pretty brutal. So
yeah, we like to say summertime shy. Like the summers are awesome. Anyway, I didn't grow up in Chicago. You can probably tell by my accent, and I know you didn't grow up in California. Tell me a little bit about your childhood. How did you grow up? Where did you grow up? And just a little bit more about your childhood experiences.
I'm going to do that. I'm going to weave faith a little bit into that because that's the nature of the podcast. And I want to add a couple of historic bullets in there because it's not a story I tell very frequently.
Yeah.
I actually come from a history of people that loved God. In 1685, my ancestors had to flee France as refugees because of their faith. And they went to Holland, and then it was a safe haven for religious minorities. And then from then they went to South Africa. So that's where my family and ancestors have been for the past almost 500 years, 500 years. And then my grandfathers were ministers in the church. So that gives you a little picture of my background. And then another interesting fact is I'm the fifth Jeanette. Now I go by JB because it's easy. I'm in sales. You shouldn't make life hard, especially if you're trying to sell something. And no one can ever pronounce my name except the French, Jeanette. But I'm the fifth Jeanette, and in a line. And the first Jeanette was actually named Jeanette after a French female missionary that worked in Eastern Africa. And then my grandma's mom, if I'm not mistaken, named her daughter Jeanette. So just something interesting. And it's so sad that I'm now going by JB, but it just makes my life so easy. So that's a story about my name as well. But more about the details. I got to know Jesus as a child. I grew up in South Africa, Pretoria. Pretoria is a pretty small city compared to Chicago, pretty small city. It is the capital of South Africa. I always say its claim to fame is that Elon Musk is from there. Grew up there.
I did not know that.
Well, very different parts of Pretoria. He grew up very differently than I did, but you have to have your little claim to fame.
Right.
And we grew up in a side where it was like a farm. We literally didn't have a supermarket, not a bar, not a hotel, not a restaurant where there was nothing, just farm. Very simple life growing up. I can add a little tidbit. My biggest takeaway of my childhood was actually, it's boring. I just don't want to have a boring life. So I had a very stable life. Mm-hmm. And I got to know the Lord as a little girl because my parents both love the Lord. Now you'll hear that I'm not saying we went to church. There's a difference. Yeah. You can go to church, but not know the Lord. My parents really knew the Lord. If I had a big test or something I was anxious about at school, and I would talk to my parents about that, my dad would say, Jeanette, let's pray. We'd go on our knees and we'd pray about it. So that's how I grew up. And then I gave my life to Jesus as a child. And then in my high school years, I decided, let me back up. My parents were very aware of how privileged we were because we were born again. We got to know the Lord. And if you live in this world and your family owns a car and a bike, normal bike, road bike that you pedal, not electric bike, you are actually in the top 20% of the world in terms of affluency. So even though we were poorer than anyone around us,
you still had those.
We were very aware of the have-nots. Yeah. And then in my school years, I decided that God's been so good to me. I want to give back. So I went to go do missionary work the year after school for a year. After that, I went, my normal life. I went to go study a couple of degrees.
A couple of degrees. I like how you said that so casually. Just a couple of degrees.
Well, there's more context. I don't want to keep you too busy for too long, but I lived in a small town. I got married in my 20s and I had the bandwidth. I was not having kids in my 20s. I had the bandwidth my third value is growth. My first value is God or faith. Second value is family, and third value is growth. So I always want to feel like I'm progressing in life. So I continued, got a couple of careers, and then late in my 20s, the carpet was pulled out from under my feet. And I went through a very tough time, crucible moment. I got to know God in the valley, and I don't share this all the time, but that is definitely instrumental to where I am today, but also my faith journey. Because I went through a divorce, which is firstly something that the life I come from, that wasn't part of, it didn't happen. Like I always say, you can kill somebody before you can get divorced. And that's obviously not true. But the point is, it's not like here where it's like just another thing. Yeah. And I had to say goodbye to all of my 20s. I had to say goodbye to the history I have, the friends I had, the city I lived, everything that I had in my 20s. And it was very hard. But there I got to know God. Because there's one thing about knowing God when your life is fairly easy, but when you're on your knees and you don't know how you're going to survive and how you're going to figure out life, and you have to make all those changes, you get to know him in a different way. Yeah. I got to know him as just a loving father. Yeah. And I leaned a lot on the examples of David in the Bible, that he did a lot of bad things. And God loved him. Yeah. And he loved God. So I really got to know God as my provider during that phase of my life. And it's very instrumental because then I also realized, so I was an award-winning journalist, and later I worked in education and marketing. But on the one hand, I didn't feel satisfied. I feel like I can do something more serious, more businessy with my life. But also I had to make a financial success. Right. So I had to pivot. And I did my MBA. And then when I did my MBA, I just found what I was born for. I just loved business. And then God led me through from one step to the other. And then eventually I joined SAB Miller, which is corporate. And that's a whole new chapter. But that's my life in a summary. And, there were challenges. It wasn't always plain sailing, but God's been a constant, especially in the hard times.
And that's great, because I think it's in those hard times that our character is built, right? I as I look at you and as I speak to you and as I learn more about you, I'm pretty sure you won't be this person you are now if you didn't go through what you went back then, right? In terms
100% not.
Yeah, in terms of how connected you are with God, how aware you are about his presence, and how you know that in the valleys you worship God, you seek him, in the high places, wherever you are. It's just important for us to worship him, right? He still remains the same. And that's one thing I always say to myself is God is the unchangeable changer. So what that means is that he never changes, but he changes things and he changes our situation. So in the times where things were always were down for you, he's the same God that helped, you said David, right? Or same God that helped Solomon, or same God who helped Esther, whoever. But he also changed your situation, making him the unchangeable changer. And so I love what you just shared there.
And I want to build on what you just said. You know, one of the ways I love looking at it is God is the anchor of my soul. Now, I've never been on super long cruises, but an anchor is so critical. And when that crazy storm comes, because it comes, doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, you're going to have your storm.
People might not know about it.
You will have it. But he's my anchor. He's the rock below me. And I'm not worried. I'm not scared because I trust the Lord. He's created the universe. He's created me. He's in control.
Right. And he will take care. You are a daughter of the Most High King. He will take 100%. Care of us. I love that. Thank you for sharing that story. So how old were you when you gave your life to Christ? Was it when you were super young or?
So yeah, I did it as a toddler.
Okay.
And once again, people say, oh, it's because you grew up. Well, obviously it helps if you see that. But I started my own relationship with the Lord. But then when I went through this very tough time in my late 20s, basically just before I turned 30, I got to know him on a whole different level. But as a child.
Yeah. Okay. So you've gone through the family change, your divorce, and did you stay in South Africa or did you move stateside then?
So I then moved from this small city where I lived to, not immediately. Then about a year later, I found a job, similar industry to what I was in then in education. I worked for the University of the Free State. Then I went to go work for the University of Johannesburg. But it was the same type of role, just Johannesburg is the economic capital of South Africa. Actually, in a way, you can argue of Africa. Some people say, no, it's Nairobi. But point is, so I got a job there. So at this point, I was still in education. I haven't joined the real corporate world yet.
Okay. And so what age did you join the corporate world? And was it in South Africa or did you move to join?
It was South Africa. So okay. I can continue a little bit more with that, with the corporate journey. And once again, everything I have, everything I am is because of God. If I tell you all the examples of how I got into the industry I'm in, oh man, there's no way I would have found it myself. And even my move to the States, every single step God directed. So I know I was made to eventually end up in California, to meet my husband, to start the Christian ERG. I have no, or employee circle. I have no doubts about any of that because God directed my steps. But I can go back to your question about how I joined, is I was at a point where I was ready to move to big corporates. I was done with my MBA. I did really well in it. And that's a whole story we can go into later about how God restored my confidence in myself. And that's why I'm so passionate about helping people find confidence in themselves. And I mean, he put me in the right place at the right time. I mean, I can tell you the story, but it's because God knew the plan he had for my life. So I was interviewing for a couple of different positions. I wanted to go work for one of the big corporate companies in South Africa. Investec, very cool bank, was one of those that I was interested in. And then SAB Miller, it wasn't one that I thought of, but they had the third largest marketing budget in South Africa, very sizable and prestigious company to work at. What happened? I was in Johannesburg, working at the University of Johannesburg, and I was the marketing executive for the Faculty of Management. So the Faculty of Management had the dean, so I wrote his speeches, looked after the marketing material and so forth. But there were also 12 departments. supply chain, marketing, finance, blah, 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 all of those. And I was responsible for all that marketing. Now, we had a lot of agencies and folks that were dotted line to me, but one of them invited the marketing professor, the head of marketing, said, hey, please join us for the prize giving ceremony for our honors students, which is like master degree students. I never do that. I'm a hustler. I work. I don't go and network. I don't do social things, especially then. I work. I mean, I can outwork anyone. But for some other reason, I went to go attend the function. And it was targeted, like I said, it was students that were already done with their undergrad and then the honors. And there was this general manager of SAB Miller. And he said, we want people that are talented, hardworking, ambitious, want to be in an environment where they can learn and grow. I'm like, I need to go work there. And I went up to him and I said to him, I want to come work for you. And he was a Brit, not very nice or friendly. And he looked at me, this young girl with a blonde hair. And then I said, well, I was first in my MBA class. And then he looked at me a little different. And I gave him my business card and the rest is history. But the reason I told you that entire story is, it wasn't like I grew up and then I knew I was going to work in CPG one day.
Right.
God directed those steps. And the story, I mean, I can tell you some of the stories up until today.
Yeah.
I was destined to be where I am.
Yeah. God is an intentional God, as we said, right? And yeah, our steps are ordered by him. So I love how you shared that story. And so can you share a little bit about some of the pivotal moments in your career? I feel like you've had a couple. You just shared one now. Are there any other pivotal moments that you can share that our listeners can learn from?
I can absolutely share. Well, I don't know how much people will learn from it, but ultimately just about how good God is to me. And I'm so thankful. And I have to say, if you're a child of God, doesn't mean that your life is pain-free and problem-free.
Yeah.
We have a lot of persecuted Christians around the world.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that I am so blessed to live in a country where I'm free to practice my religion. I don't take it for granted.
Yeah.
I was working at SAB Miller for a couple of years, and I wanted to be a brand manager or brand director. And that was just my goal. I just saw what they did and I knew that's what I wanted to do, but it's not like that easy. Everyone wants to be a brand manager or brand director. There were two jobs I wanted, two different roles, Grolsch and MGD, different ones, and both of them didn't work out. And I was feeling frustrated because I really wanted one. And then Castle Lite, or like Americans would say Castle Lite, came about. And I was asked to go and have a conversation with a marketing director, which is like the CMO, and I got the job. It wasn't like I was put through a very grueling process. And in hindsight, I would have never been in America today if I didn't have that job, if I got one of the others. That's why I'm saying God knows the process. So what happened is just after I was appointed, there was a new CEO, Norman Adamy. He was in the States, South Africa, and then he was in the States. He ran Miller. And then he came back and he changed the strategy, like literally a week after I got the role. And he's like, we're only going to focus on the 4 power brands, and Castle Lite, which is the highest margin of them, is going to be the real competitive horse that we're going to put basically almost all our energy in. And over my time, the budget more than quadrupled. I can say that because that is not, that's still broad enough. But here I was, don't have any brand marketing experience. Wow. And now I'm working on the brand that is the most important. And it was executive brand manager is what the title was. So it was like elevated brand manager role, same level as a brand director here. And that was a critical moment because firstly, I was learning. Now I am a fast learner and I can confidently say I can outwork anyone I've ever met. The only potential exception is my sister. She's a doctor and she runs a business. But honestly, I can. And I did that as well. But so I was new in it. But then it was just very challenging. We had to do a total brand revamp, relaunch. Usually it takes you easily 8 months to a year. But we had to do it. It was 3 months until sign off of the packaging and to get everything in place to do it before the big competitor opened their brewery, which would have crushed us. There's a lot of background, but we lost the right to brew Amstel, and Amstel was our competitor. But God bless that. That's the bottom line. I had to learn, I had to work. It was unbelievable how he blessed it. And people told me, because we incorporated cold into the positioning. So like you have Coors that is cold. That was just a normal brand. There was nothing cold about it. And we incorporated cold into the positioning. If you go to South Africa now, I was just there in January, it's everywhere. That's the brand. But it wasn't the case. Now back to my story, and I can talk about this brand all day. It was pretty scary. People told me, JB, you'll be known as the brand manager that killed Castle Lite.
Wow.
That's what people told me. Because we added the cold ink and 70% of the sales were in areas without proper refrigeration. So then the blue wouldn't appear. There were tons of challenges. But God blessed it. I had good relationships with the sales side because I come from that side. They executed. I mean, A to Z. I got Vanilla Ice. I can't say I, but we got Vanilla Ice to be the breakthrough commercial lead. And it was an absolute success. But this went on to be one of the biggest, if not the biggest success story within SAB Miller. That used to be the second largest brewer in the world. And it was absolutely amazing. But the bottom line is, why did I get that job versus people that might have been more competent? Sure, I rose to the occasion, but it was God that gave me the job. And it was him who blessed it. I honestly believe even though we work in a secondary world, we can totally ask God's blessing on our work. I mean, I sell beer for a living. That's what I do. But I pray for God's favor on the company and on the work of my hands. And Daniel in the Bible is a very good example. So for those who don't know, and this is history, you can go read it. So he was in exile. So they took the Israelites to Babylon for 70 years and he became the leader. He was a number 2 under the king. But he was a man of excellence. Sure, people didn't believe in his God, but he was a man of excellence. So I believe wherever we are, God can bless us and God can bless the work of our hands. So that Castle Lite story was absolutely critical to my career, because if you go read the case study, it was just such a phenomenal case study and such a phenomenal success. And then from there, I moved to a couple of other brands. And then I got the opportunity to come work in the States on the Miller Lite brand turnaround. And that was also a wonderful experience. And along the way, there were stressful times. And for me, I lean on God. I trust God. Every decision not every, but big decisions that I make, I ask God for his wisdom. I remember the day before I presented to the CEO of Molson Coors, it was Miller Coors at the time, 2014, in front of him and his entire team, how I prayed about it for God to give me favor in that meeting. And it was a very, very good meeting. Now, you might say it might have gone well without you praying. Sure, it might have, or maybe not. And that meeting went so well. We got the funding to invest in the brand turnaround. Another highlight of my career that I can spend a little time on is then I moved to sales. I got to a point where I wasn't sure what was next for me in my career. I've done marketing at that point for more than 10 years. And I was invited to move to the sales side. Somebody saw the potential in me. And I did not know whether I'd be good at that. But I'm so grateful that God led my path that way, because I believe one of my biggest gifts is leading with zeal. I believe that's a gift, but if it wasn't for the way it directed my path, I might have missed out on that. So those are some of my key highlights of my career, and through it all, it was God, honestly. And then I've learned a ton of lessons through that.
I mean, just listening to it, there's a ton, as you said, right? Like trusting God, leaning on God, involving God in your career decisions. I think that's something that many of us struggle with, right? We say, okay, we go to church on Sunday, we pray at night, but we don't necessarily involve God into our career decisions, or, even if we just need help. And I love how you said about, you had a big meeting and you prayed. I can't tell you how many times I have felt imposter syndrome. I have no idea what I'm doing. I've put my hand up to say, oh, I'll do it. And then it comes to it and I open my computer, I read the email, and I'm like, oh my goodness, Lord, I don't even know what I'm doing, but I just volunteered anyway to be that overachiever. But that's when I just surrendered to God. And I'm like, Lord, please just help me. Just show me who I need to talk to, what I need to read, who can help me. And I think it's in that moment, God just opens a door and just gives me the answer that I need, either through a person or through me watching a video just to help myself. And so I think that we as professionals can all continue to do that, right? Where we just ask God to help us in the moment, not just to ask him for a job or ask him to get the job or ask him for favor. That's great. But one of the prayers I pray is that God should establish the work of my hands, you know, and as he establishes the work of my hands, I believe the work that I produce will be a blessing to who it needs to bless.
100%.
So I love that. Okay. So you're in the US now. You said you're working for Coors, marketing and sales. Things are popping. Things are going well. You have your son, your husband in California. And then it came to your mind to start an employee circle of faith in your job.
Yes.
Tell a little bit more about that.
I have a lot that I can share about that. And it actually happened very organically. First, during COVID, I started the Women in Sales ERG at the company. It started very organic, webinar series, and it grew and grew, and then eventually became a formal ERG, the Women in Sales, and all the women in sales participate. Great success. And then a couple of things happened. I had a conversation with somebody from Apple that's part of the Christian Fellowship at Apple, and somebody from Google that's part of the Christian Fellowship with Google. Thought to myself, now that's interesting. I'm way more passionate about God than I am about women. I mean, I'm passionate about many things, but God is right up there. There's an opportunity. And then what really happened is my boss had a meeting and he had his leadership team on stage. So we were like 8 people on stage, about 100 people in the audience. And they gave each of us the opportunity to just speak for a minute or two about who we are, like our resume on a slide, if you will. And I decided, and they had like, you can add examples like your dogs and your favorite sports teams. And I thought to myself, now, well, I'm the most passionate about God.
Yeah.
Way more than about any sports team or my dog. Surely I can share that. I should share that. If I don't, then I'm not being authentic, because this is the most important thing in my life. When I did that, I did not elaborate. I just said that my 3 core values are my faith in Jesus Christ, my family, and growth. And then I continued. And then afterwards, 3 people, but 2 gentlemen straight afterwards walked up to me. It's like, JB, we also born again Christians.
Yes.
And then up until that point, I did not know of one other Christian. I mean, we're talking about 6-7 years into being at the company. I didn't know one other Christian up until the moment that I said that. And I've never done something like that as publicly. It's not that I hide it, but you know what it is like in corporate. Yeah. And then I decided that, you know what, I'm going to start something. And then I did a training with somebody else, and he said something that made me wonder, somebody in Milwaukee. I text him, are you by any chance a Christian? He's like, yeah. And I decided to start something informal. We started with a life group where we meet every second Friday morning at 6:30, because it's the only way I can manage it. It needs to be before my workday starts, because then it's just crazy. But every second Friday morning at 6:30, we meet for 30 to 45 minutes. And we've been doing that for 3 years.
Yeah.
And then at some point, somebody told, people tell other people. It's been very small, very organic growth. And then at some point, our CFO heard from somebody, and she's like, I'll support you guys. I'll be your sponsor, if you will. And then we formalized it, and we became an employee circle. And it's been a wonderful experience. To give you an example, one of my friends I made this way, Bob Taylor is his name. He is retiring this week after 47 years. Quite an achievement at the company. And actually still haven't met him in person. I know him super well. We phone each other when we need to. We chat all the time. I've never met him in person. I probably will in April when I'm in Milwaukee. But he's my great friend and a great supporter. And I met him through this employee circle.
Yeah. It's funny because I actually started something similar too in my office. We had the Christian group, but we didn't have a local chapter. And I'm based in Chicago, which is obviously one of the larger offices across North America. So I was like, we need a Bible study, bro and sis. And so I think for me, I didn't really know anyone, a person of faith at work. So what I did is I just sent an email. I was like, you know what, if people want to join, they'll join. And I was like, Lord, establish the work of my hands. And I just sent the email and people just came back and was like, yeah, I'd love to join. I'd love to join. And people just started joining. And now we're going to the point where people from other offices in North America join our Bible study. And we have, we do prayer, we read the Bible, we pray for one another, we encourage one another. We have really great discussions. And so I am a huge advocate of employee circles, ERGs, whatever we want to call them, for people of faith, because I think, again, the workplace can be so crazy and so busy that I think having that safe space to encourage, inspire, and pray for one another, I think is so beautiful. And the funny thing is, I've seen people join and I'm like, I had no idea that you were a Christian.
Exactly. Exactly. To give you an example, I worked during COVID at the biggest food bank in Orange County, was part of Saddleback Church. I was working there. And this guy asked me, so where do you work? I'm like, at Molson Coors. He's like, oh, but there's another guy here working in the food bank today from Molson Coors. I'm like, what? Randy Hardwick. I know this guy. We're not on the same team. Same thing. I did no idea. We've been friends ever since.
Yeah, that's great. And so as we wrap up, and this has been such a good conversation. I was just looking at the clock and I'm like, wait, we've spoken.
Oh, yeah, I can talk for another 2 hours.
Oh, JV. I would love for you to share, if you were going to share like any tips of how people can start an employee circle ERG for people of faith, because I do know there's a lot of corporations, a lot of firms, a lot of organizations that have them, right? If you think about some of the bigger companies, the Googles, as you said, Apple's, Meta, like I feel like they already have faith-based groups, but for the smaller corporations or even for those who don't have them, any tips or advice that you would share with someone who's interested in starting one?
A couple of thoughts here. The first one is do it. Okay. The first thought is do it. Don't hesitate. But what I would start by doing is praying about it. We as Christians, oftentimes I was like, oh, Pedro, I'll pray for you. But maybe I will, maybe I won't.
Yeah.
Don't just talk about it.
That's a word. That's so true. Go ahead.
Just talk about it. That's why I learned something from my good friend, Jeff Morgan, who was actually also in this group. He's like, if somebody says, will you pray for me? He's like, on the spot, let's do it. It's not just talk about it, let's really do it. But pray about it. Ask God to direct your steps because, folks, our life is but a breath. The average American lives 79 years. Yeah. It's a very short moment in time if you think about eternity. And we have a life after this. And we have to make most of this life. I believe every person has a purpose. Absolutely. And pray about it and ask God to open the right doors. And then I'd be open with your faith. Now, there are different ways to do it. But Rick Warren says, don't be a judge or a lawyer, just be a witness. So just be open when you say, how was your weekend? It was great. We had a baseball game and we went to church. The point is just be open about it as where it's natural. Be excellent at your work. I think that's really important as well. Continue to be excellent at your work in the workplace. And then as opportunities arise, you can form those connections. And there are different ways in which you can do it, but starting by praying about it, being open, and then ask, like you say, take the initiative. We're currently doing this study with Joshua about just being bold and being courageous. And that's another theme of my life is if you have in your heart to form a Christian group, like you did, you sent an email out. But what I do want to add as well, let's just think about Christianity. What is it all about? Yeah. It's about Jesus who loves us, gave his life for us. That's what it's about. When he was asked what are the most important commandments, it was love the Lord your God and your neighbor as yourself. And as you think about the workplace, that for me is the messaging. You want to love, you are already loving your God, but you want to just be good to others and to other Christians. It's not about, oh, we go to this church, or there are so many divisive issues. That's not what this is about. Yeah. This is about each of us finding people that we can be in community with to pray with, pray for, and just giving us a better work experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing I would say to that, lastly, as we wrap up, would be, there are so many other ERGs or employee circles, right? Like people who have similar interests. And so don't be afraid to start it. I think the only thing is that just make sure that your company is okay with it, right? What you don't want to do, God is a God of order. So what you don't want to do is be like, oh yeah, I felt the Spirit telling me this. And then you're going against, what the company policy is. You always have to be obedient in that regard. But yeah, it's be bold and courageous. Joshua 1:7, step out and just close your eyes and do it. But once you do it, you realize, wait, there's so many people like me, and we all share the same beliefs, and we can make an impact. And then the other thing I would say is, don't be forceful, right? We're not group is not a time to be, start bringing your Bible to the meetings at work and like sharing. Like, some people don't want to hear it. Let's just be honest. And you said it perfectly, JB, where you said, really, our excellence is what should be. Right? We are ambassadors of Christ in the workplace. Our excellence should be able to speak on our behalf, and as and when people get more interested in us, they will come to know who we are, and we can share our faith that way organically.
100%. I love all of that, and I think you said something important. Don't force it.
Yeah.
Be patient. I mean, imagine being CEO of a company or the head of D&I. All the stuff that you read in the news. It's a hard thing to navigate.
Yeah.
You want to make it easy, and you want to make it clear what it's about. It's about people living out your faith, having a community. It's about inclusion, very important. But it's wonderful to me, let me tell you, to have the opportunity every second Friday to listen to a teaching with my fellow colleagues and then pray for each other. It's so uplifting and it's so wonderful. And I'm so grateful. Yeah. Firstly, that I work for a company. We have 5 values as a company. And the first value is put people first. And we've had it for a while, but during COVID, I saw a very strong movement in that direction. That's really the desire of the company, to put people first. Yeah. So that is part of the backdrop. And then with that is honor your company and just be open with us, like you say. And even if you find 2 or 3 friends initially, it's all right. It's all right.
Yeah. I love that. JB, it's been so good chatting with you. It's been so good.
Thank you, Peju.
Thank you so much.
Peju. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Yes.
And if anyone want to reach out to me, don't hesitate. And the thing that I forgot to say is that I'm grateful that I work for a company that values its people, but I'm also grateful to live in a country. We've got problems, sure, so does every country in the world. But the way I can actually have this conversation with you, and I can honor God and worship Him freely. It's a privilege, and we should never take that privilege for granted. I'm very grateful.
It is a privilege. It is a privilege. And if people want to find you, what's the best way?
LinkedIn, JB. There's only one JB, Jeanette Boshoff-Ryan. And I have a social handle, UIGNITED. I have, that's about it.
Awesome.
And you can find my email address on LinkedIn. I'm pretty good on my LinkedIn messages.
All right. I will leave your details in the podcast details. So as people listen to you, they can find you and follow you. But thank you for your time, and we shall connect soon, JB.
Thank you so much. God bless you, Peju.
God bless. Thank you so much for listening to the Christians in Corporate podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I would love to hear your feedback. So please be sure to comment down below or connect with me on social media using the handle @PejuAkintarin. Oh, wait, and one more thing. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content just like this. See you in the next episode.